Right in the middle of my brother's lavish party, my father raised his glass and announced, "Angela, you can contribute $30,000 to Miles's wedding as a gift." The whole room erupted in applause while I went still. It was my birthday, not a single wish, just treating me like a walking wallet. Spoons chimed against glasses beneath the crystal chandelier. The Upper East Side restaurant gleamed white. The server set down the tenderloin, and the scent of browned butter couldn't wash away the bitterness in my throat. $30,000 was spoken as lightly as ordering another bottle of wine. Miles leaned back. "You get the family most," he said. "Mom closed the deal. That's what sisterly Love Island." Dad set his scotch down with a hard clink. "Family helps family. You got a bonus chip in so the wedding looks right. $30,000 isn't much for your position." I looked at my dark phone screen. Not one birthday message. I'd flown from New York to Chicago, hoping for a warm dinner. At work, the CEO had just shaken my hand over a major deal. At this table, it all shrank to a number someone else decided for me. "Say something," Mom lowered her voice. I looked at Miles. "Did you call me yet?" He hesitated, then laughed it off. "Oh, happy birthday, Angie. I thought tonight was a joint celebration." A few people chuckled. The server poured more champagne. I covered my glass. "Thank you, that's enough." I thought of the small cake in my Manhattan fridge, one candle waiting to be lit. I'd planned to end the night with a FaceTime to Laura and my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Parker, but that applause earlier shut inside me like a door. From now on, I'd lock it myself. "I won't be putting in $30,000, I said calmly. "I have plans for my money." The air dropped. Dad set his knife on the plate, the metal sound dry and sharp. "Say that again." He spoke as if to a subordinate. I repeated, "I'm not contributing." Mom exhaled hard. "Angela, Miles, and Jessica have to put down a deposit for the venue. You're the older sister, and it's my birthday." I cut in. Someone coughed. Miles arched a brow. "Don't make a big deal. You can afford it." "In this family," I answered, "you've remembered me only when it's time to pay." I didn't want to prosecute them in a restaurant. But saying it out loud lifted the load, like setting down a sack of ice I'd carried too long. Dad folded his arms. "Don't get emotional. Be practical. Miles carries the family name. You have your own career. Family comes first." The phrase, family name, sliced me like a paper edge. I looked around, relatives smiling politely, Miles's friends bright-eyed with wine. Everyone waited for me to return to my old role, apologize, pull out my card, promise to wire the money. I'd played that role for years, at other people's parties, on other people's vacations, in that Lake Michigan summer at 16 when I was left with Grandma. I knew this script. "I'll pay for my dinner," I said, "and I wish you to the wedding you want. But the rest of that money I'm keeping for my future." I stood. The wooden chair scraped a thin sound across the floor. I folded my napkin onto the rim of the plate. "If anyone asks," I added, "tell them it's my birthday." Silence stretched taut as wire. Then glasses clinked. I nodded to the server, walked past the bar where the bartender shook a tin, the ice knocking like a steady heartbeat. I pushed the door and stepped into the street. Night wind slipped under my collar. I checked my phone. Still no birthday wishes. My thumb hovered over Laura's name, then stopped. I didn't need anyone to soothe my sadness for me. I wanted to remember it, to mark a new boundary. An Uber pulled to the curb. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked. "Home," I said. And as the door shut, I knew. Home would no longer be a high-rise rental with a mini cake. Home would be somewhere else, chosen, paid for, opened, and locked by me. My Manhattan apartment was quiet. I set down my bag, opened the fridge, and took out the cake. I planted the small candle and lit it. "Happy birthday," I whispered to myself. It wasn't others who were changing, it was me. An image rose. Still water, a wooden porch, a gray-painted door, a window opening to a starry sky. I opened my eyes and blew the candle softly. The thin smoke curled like thread and vanished. I washed the glassware, put away the knife and fork. Notification 5:30 a.m. Run in Central Park. I turned it off. I opened my laptop and typed, Lake House, Vermont. Photos appeared. Wood roof, wide porch, water flat as glass. I lingered on one with a wall-sized window. I didn't yet know whom to call, what to ask, or how it would pencil out. I just knew I needed a place where no one called me, the way they'd call a credit card. A place I belonged because I chose it. I snapped a picture of a listing with a balcony facing the lake and saved it under Dreams. I turned off the kitchen light. Manhattan still hummed outside, but inside the apartment was a different kind of quiet, not because I'd been forgotten, but because I'd just begun. I drew the curtains, lay on the sofa, and pulled the duvet to my shoulders. Before sleep, I smiled. I had told that Uber to take me home, but starting tonight, home had moved. Tomorrow morning, I'd make the first appointment, and this time I would be the one to open the door. I woke before dawn to the smell of coffee dripping and the rumble of the garbage truck on the street below. The laptop lid sat ajar, like an eye waiting for my touch, but I didn't lift it. I sat still and let the past slip out like an underground stream, cool, dark, persistent. When I was 8, Illinois summers felt sticky as cotton candy. The whole family loaded the beige minivan for Wisconsin Dells. Dad said, "You stay with Grandma a few days. The water park is crowded. You wouldn't like it." I nodded, hugging a one-eyed doll. Grandma tied my hair and smiled gently. My pancakes beat any water park. We ate pancakes while I listened to waterslide ads from the neighbor's TV. Imagining Miles shooting down a green tube and my parents shouting at the bottom of the tower. I sensed dimly, the family's shared fun rarely had room for me. At 11, Mom promised a table at Red Lobster for my birthday. That afternoon, the teacher called me to the office. "Your parents have to cheer Miles at his speech competition. You'll go to Grandma's, okay?" I nodded, carrying a Costco cupcake box. Grandma lit a tea candle. "Make a wish," she said. I wished, small and quiet. Next time, Mom would tie my hair before some ceremony, the way she did for Miles. The candle went out, the smoke curled into the sugar smell, and that wish kept stretching across the years. At 16, friends invited me to watch fireworks on the lakefront. Mom said, "Miles needs the car for debate practice. You stay home." I watched Lake Michigan through the window. The fireworks were only reflections on glass. Grandma called, "Turn on the radio, it'll help." I put on a country station and, for the first time, understood being the audience in the very last row, watching the family perform Miles's future while I stood outside the light. High school graduation day, a misty drizzle. My name was read with an APUS history medal, but afterward at dinner Dad raised his glass and told everyone about Miles's internship. "Angela studies hard," he said, "but her SAT score wasn't as high as his." Polite laughter. Miles winked. "No worries, she's great at pumping up a crowd." I washed my hands a long time. The cheap soap clung to my wrists like ink. From then on, I learned to smile on cue, nod on beat, and sheath my feelings like a knife. I went to school in Evanston, half an hour from home. Move-in day. Mom made my bed and rushed Miles to debate camp. Grandma stayed and pressed a blue jacket notebook into my hand. "Write your good days," she said. "When it's hard to remember, open it." That first night I wrote. Today I hung string lights myself, bought my own ramen. Emailed the professor. Reminded myself to breathe. Every line began with self, like a contract I signed. Self-watch, self-comfort, self-heal. At 21, friends threw a bar birthday. I ducked into a small bakery, bought a 6-inch carrot cake, and texted, "Mom, I'll swing by after 7. She replied, "Perfect, tonight we're at the relatives for Miles's engagement. Come over." When I arrived, she said yes banner stretched across the wall, and the living room bloomed with flowers. Dad steadied the future bride's shoulder. Mom air-kissed everyone. The cake I carried warmed in the paper bag. No one asked what I was holding. I left it in the kitchen, cut a small slice with a plastic knife, ate standing by the sink, and swallowed down the lump in my throat. One Thanksgiving, I worked at a bookstore to afford a winter coat. Dad called mid-shift. "Come home for dinner. Don't disappoint your mother." I left early with a Trader Joe's pie. When I walked in, every seat at the table was taken, plus a couple of Miles's teammates. Mom smiled. "You can take the kitchen stool." I bit into pie by the counter and listened to talk of contracts, MBAs, and Yale prospects. I was no one's center, and the stool fit my shadow perfectly. In the following years, it got subtler. Mom said, "Angela's so independent, she doesn't like gatherings." Dad added, "She's built for work." I turned into the person who could get things done without bothering anyone. I moved to New York, worked in marketing, lived by meeting calendars and coffee to go. Holidays, I shipped gifts. Before UPS cutoffs, scarf for mom, tie for dad, gift card for Miles. Thank you texts arrived like receipts. Quick, short, nameless. Grandma died when I got my first promotion. At the funeral, I spoke last. Told stories of pancakes, tea candles, and the blue jacket notebook. Mom dabbed her eyes. "You're so good with words." At the burial, I lingered by the headstone. If she'd been there, she would have said, "Eat on time, so your stomach doesn't complain." I smiled, then felt the cold run down my back. In this city, no one would call and ask, "Did you eat?" After the funeral, Dad asked me to send Miles my partner list. "Family helps family," he said. I shared a few general contacts and kept the ones I'd spent 2 years building. Miles closed a deal. At the celebration, Dad clapped his shoulder. "You nailed it." Then he turned to me. "See? Learn to be more on target like him." I lifted my water, listened to the fizz like light rain, and realized misdirected praise had become habit. Winter of 29. Snow dusted the sidewalks like powdered sugar. I caught the flu, my throat raw. I called Mom, wanting to hear someone's voice. "I'm trying on dresses with Jessica. I'll call tomorrow," she said. The line cut. I simmered chicken soup by Grandma's recipe. Steam fogged the glass, the dill and celery eased my chest. I ate slowly, opened the blue notebook, and wrote, "Today I cooked for myself." Another time, I won an internal award for a campaign that lifted revenue 41%. I sent the photo to the family. Mom gave it a thumbs-up emoji. Dad stayed silent. Miles asked for a client's email. I shared it with a note. "Loop me before you use my contact." He replied, "You're too tense." I wrote in the notebook, "Not tense, standing tall." Flipping back, I saw my handwriting straighter, less apologetic. Those fragments stacked into a thin wall behind a "no worries" smile. I built a life with stones, self-move, self-learn reporting, self-change the oil, self-visit urgent care for a sprained wrist, self-change the ceiling bulb with a folding chair. Each small task was a brick. I kept building, thinking peace waited behind the wall. Then last night, when Dad raised his glass and said the number like it was my name, the wall shuddered and revealed the hollow. I had never put myself in the center. I didn't want to turn bitter. I love my work, love fitting a tagline just right, love the morning chill and night lights on 2nd Avenue. I love how Grandma taught me to flip a pancake only once, don't rush, and how she folded blankets, right side out, corners square. I carry those small things as a compass, reminding me to keep a gentle core, even while I learn to be firm. But love cannot be a one-way road. The people who say Angela's built for independence never saw me blow a tea candle over a Costco cupcake, never heard the country radio crackle on a fireworks night, never knew the blue notebook is nearly full, with a few white pages waiting to be written by days that won't be forgotten. This morning, I poured coffee and opened the window. Early air carried yesterday's rain. I set the notebook on the table, turned to a fresh page, and wrote, "I will choose myself." I closed it. The past is long enough to explain my present choices and heavy enough that I don't want to carry it alone anymore. That morning, I brought my laptop to the dining table, sunlight streaking the rim of my coffee cup. I meant to open my meeting calendar, but paused at the family inbox. A notification popped. Claudia added you to Edward's family plan. I frowned. The name sounded like a budget sheet. I tapped in, ready to leave the group, but messages were flooding in. Members, Dad, Mom, Miles, Jessica, a few aunts, cousins, and me. I scrolled to the top. Dad. Lock the wedding numbers. Angela got a bonus. Her part needs to be clear. Mom. Right. She should put in $30,000 for the venue. Jessica. 20 would be polite, but 30 looks better. Miles. She's practical, she'll get it. I set the phone down and leaned back. The words her part nicked like a paper cut. I picked the phone up and kept reading. Dad, besides money, Angela handles PR. She knows the press. Mom. And the hotel get us a good rate. Miles. Send me the Region Tech and Westfield emails. I'll follow up separately. Mom. Don't be direct. Angela's sensitive. Just say, family supports family. A hollow opened in my chest, not to cry space for one thought to take root. It's time to stop saying yes. I left the ringer off and watched the words keep rolling. New pings, Aunt Carol. Angela's independent, let her shoulder more. Cousin Ethan, she's in New York with a high salary. Give her the band, too. I opened notes and typed. Screenshots. I snapped every segment and numbered them. Not for revenge, just to keep a record. Memory can get lost, text cannot. A private ping from Miles flashed. Sis, give me the CMO's direct line at Region Tech? And confirm the $30K so Mom doesn't have to nudge. The wink showed the seam. I replied, go through their PR office. I don't share personal numbers. And the money I already said no last night. The typing dots appeared and vanished. Soon the group added, Mom, Miles says Angela's being difficult. Don't coddle. Just announce her contribution. Dad. Final. Angela $30,000. Groom's family $25,000. Miles covers the rest. I'll send the task file. I pressed my hand to my forehead. I wanted to shut the laptop, then Jessica texted, I don't want to upset Angela, but a wedding is a big deal. I hope you understand, for the sake of the family image. Image. That word is my profession. Here, it's paint covering a crack. I closed the laptop. Lid, but the phone buzzed again. Dad. Angela. PR and communications. Reception. Budget. Hotel. VIP list. Mom. And order the flowers. She has good taste. I saw an invisible version of myself walk through the tasks, smiling, nodding, answering emails, wiring money. That stand-in had lived in my place for too long. I slid my finger to turn off notifications. The stand-in faded. Laura texted. Lunch? Me. Yes. I need to tell you something. Before heading out, I opened the Blue Jacket notebook and copied a line straight from the screen. Don't be direct. Angela is sensitive. Under it I wrote, I'm sensitive to disrespect. The blue ink dried fast. The Italian place on the corner of Madison smelled of warm tomatoes and basil. Laura set down 2 Americanos. I handed her my phone and scrolled for her to see. Her eyelid twitched. Did you screenshot everything? Yes. Good. Laura said evenly. Not to expose them so you can remind yourself this is fact, not a feeling. I nodded, feeling her words anchor in the right spot. I used to believe if I gave a little more, they'd finally see me. Laura stirred her spoon. You're not a walking check. And family image isn't a cemetery for feelings. The bell rang. A call from Dad. I let it ring out. A text followed immediately. Family Zoom at 6 p.m. Be there. I typed, I'm busy tonight. What will you do? Laura asked. Not do, I said. Stop doing. No unpaid jobs. No giving out personal numbers. No letting anyone read the thank yous that belong to me. Laura squeezed my hand for a second. You get to set the terms for how people use your time and labor. In the afternoon, I stopped by a small print shop. I sent the image file and asked for A4 prints with clear covers. The clerk asked, "Thesis materials?" I smiled. Materials for clarity. The warm ink pages stacked straight. Back home, I spread them on the table. The line "Angela got a bonus. Her part needs to be clear" stood beside. "Don't be direct, she's sensitive." Next to them, PR and communications, hotel, band, 30K. The mirror of words reflected the face I'd avoided. I wasn't invisible, I was being treated as a resource. The phone buzzed again. Miles. Don't make this a thing. Family is family. I typed, because it's family, respect matters more. I set the phone face down and listened to my breathing steady, deeper than last night. Dusk slid over the roofline. I opened the window so the breeze could lift the corner of the top sheet, flicking the cover. I didn't open the group chat again. I poured more water, letting the soft boils score my thoughts. Not many words, just clear boundaries. Tomorrow, if they asked, I'd answer once, then hold my silence. On the table were only the blue jacket notebook, a pen, and the fresh stack of prints. 3 things, enough for the next step: record, keep, then say plainly that from now on, anything with my name on it will be decided by me. The next afternoon, I slid the packet into my tote, locked the apartment, and headed out. I'd already texted that I wouldn't join Zoom. Mom called nonstop, then concluded, "Family dinner at 6, no absences." I wanted to say it face to face, once, then file away the conversation like a case closed. The suburban house north of Chicago had a gray stone roof. The doorbell rang, the door opened, the smell of polished wood mixed with sauce. Mom had her phone wedged between shoulder and cheek. When she saw me, she covered the mic and lowered her voice. "Right on time, Angela. Everyone's waiting for assignments." I didn't take off my coat. The dining room was laid with a cloth, votives in glass, shining flatware. Dad sat at the head, Miles to his right, Jessica to his left. A stack of pale blue folders sat on the table. I set down my tote and pulled out the packet in the clear cover. Dad adjusted his cuff. "Let's get to it. A wedding takes coordination. Your mother and I have assigned roles. You're in charge of PR, the hotel, the flowers, and contributing $30,000. Also, give Miles the necessary contacts. Clear?" His voice was crisp. Miles nodded, not looking at me. I placed a printed page in front of each of them. "This is the group chat. Mom added me to this morning," I said. "So we don't have to argue about memories." Dad frowned. Those were internal outlines. I flipped the first page. "Here. Angela got a bonus. Her part needs to be clear." "Here. Don't be direct. Angela is sensitive." And here's the task list with the 30,000 figure. The air sank. Mom slid deeper in her chair. "You're overreacting. Texts make coordination faster. It's all for the family image." I looked at her. "I work with image. I know when it's used to cover the truth." I drew a breath and spoke plainly. "The truth is I don't agree." A spoon tapped a plate. Dad drummed a fingernail on the table. "Which part don't you agree with?" "All of it," I answered. "I won't take those tasks and I won't contribute $30,000. Miles snorted. "You're kidding. You make plenty, it's not hard." Jessica laid a hand on his. "Let Angela finish." I kept it brief. Years of backing the household, logistics, handing off contacts, covering so we don't miss the chance. I mentioned quiet birthdays, dinners on a kitchen stool, gifts shipped like receipts. "I'm not here to reweigh the past," I said. "But starting today, the boundary changes." Dad's voice tightened. "In this house, parents set the boundaries." I lifted my head. "No, Dad. Boundaries belong to the person who lives with the consequences." I'm responsible for my time, my money, and my reputation. Mom sniffed. You sound like an outsider. Calmly, I said, I'm your daughter in this family, but I'm no longer a wallet. Everything grew dense. Miles shifted. Fine, less money. 20,000? At least handle the hotel. No, I said. The word dropped neat as a pebble on still water. I respect your wedding. I'll attend as a guest. That's all. Dad's face changed. You're embarrassing us. Slowly, I said. Embarrassment doesn't come from telling the truth. It comes from how we treat each other. Jessica spoke softly. I know you've been shortchanged, but everyone just wants the wedding to go well. I looked at her. What's good for the wedding can't be bad for someone in the family. Then to my parents, if you need a lead, hire a wedding planner. Dad laughed dryly. You're equating family with a paid service? I answered, I'm refusing unpaid service. Mom reached for her water. She sighed. We raised you all these years, and when we need you, you turn away, I said. Raising a child is responsibility and love, not an investment to be recouped. I wrote down 2 planner numbers. If you need them, I'll refer you. As for my partner's personal contacts, I won't share them outside proper channels. Dad looked at the numbers I'd written and lowered his voice. You think you're strong. But beyond family, no one stands with you forever. I said, I have my work, my friends, people who show respect. And, first of all, I stand with myself. I pushed back my chair and stood. I'm heading out. I've been clear. Mom hurried. At least stay for dinner. I shook my head. I won't eat where I'm treated like a budget spreadsheet. Miles threw after me. Don't regret this. I paused in the doorway. Regret is what happens when you don't say what needs saying. I gave a small nod and walked out. The carpeted hall swallowed my footsteps. On the porch, the sky had darkened. I opened my bag and checked the packet. The corners were square and tight. I didn't know what they'd say about me once the door shut. For the first time, I didn't need to guess. I got in the car and started the engine. Red lights, then green, took turns leading me. I thought of the dinner I'd cook for myself, the lake photo saved on my phone, the morning call I'd make to schedule a showing. Merging onto the highway, a thought settled like a thin snow. Saying no doesn't break a family, it stops me from breaking myself to fit the old shape. If anyone asks when I began to change, I'll remember the dining table, the ping of a spoon on china, and that single no dropping sending ripples long after the water looked calm. The next morning, I reached Midtown earlier than usual. The sky was clear, glass towers flashed. I paused at the office entrance, wondering why my steps felt light, like after surgery without anesthesia. I'd said no and could breathe deeper. The front desk dinged. Laura waited in the lobby with 2 lattes. How was dinner? She asked. I inhaled the milk foam. I held my line, I said. No PR, no hotel, no 30,000. Laura nodded. Good. Westridge has an update today. On 20, the glass conference room faced the East River. The screen lit, charts appeared. Finance reported, Westridge's quarterly revenue rose 41% after the campaign. The brand director joined by video. You saved us from cuts. I walked through timelines and the touch points that changed conversion. My hands were steady, my voice round and even. Afterward, the CEO invited the team to the lounge. On the counter sat a mousse cake, 1 candle. A day late, he said, but necessary. The whole room sang happy birthday. I watched the flame reflected in my colleague's eyes. Make a wish, Laura whispered. I wished to keep choosing myself without losing kindness. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom on my lock screen. You humiliated the family last night. Relatives will come over this afternoon to revisit it. Dad's thread followed. When the younger generation marries, everyone contributes. You're selfish. I put the phone face down and clicked focus. Laura slid a plate into my hand. Eat, she said. Not for them, for your blood sugar. Late morning, I led the creative team reviewing Westfield's key visual. A junior pitched a line, a bit ornate. I said, "Keep the sentence short, something you can say in one breath." The room laughed. The studio manager reminded us of client feedback. I shared that they'd asked for more budget after the numbers rose. They said it was because your team listens. I didn't mention being up until 2 a.m. Adjusting the plan here, effort is paid and respected. At lunch, Laura pulled me to Bryant Park. The stone bench was warm. "Are you going to respond?" she asked. I shook my head. "I said it last night. Saying more is a rerun." Laura watched a bus pull up. I grew up in a family obsessed with image too. They taught me to be gentle, to nod. But gentle doesn't mean disappearing. I smiled. "How many times have you told me that? Until you don't need to hear it." In the afternoon, I took a call from a former client's HR director inviting me to run a crisis comms workshop. "We want someone who's weathered a tough campaign," she said. I set dates and fees. Hanging up, I thought about how my family calculates my share, then I laughed. Here, my share is expertise. There, it's my wallet. At 5, the company gathered in the pantry for the CEO's quarterly notes. He thanked various teams. At PR, he glanced my way. Angela led the crew through a hard season. I learned short, right, one breath from her. Laughter. I bowed my head, neck warm with embarrassment and gratitude. I told myself to log this, like a dose of balance. As office lights dimmed, I stayed to tweak a few lines in a proposal for a medical device client. Outside, the sky sank to indigo. My phone lit, family meeting, reminder. I tapped delete. In the window's reflection, I saw myself clearly. Black blazer, bright eyes, straight shoulders. I remembered the lonely birthday night, the cupcake, the blue jacket pages. Then, the single breath over a candle, and the listings I'd scrolled. On the way home, I stopped by my usual bakery. The owner slid over a box. "A makeup birthday cake house special." I smiled. "How'd you know I needed makeup?" "Who doesn't need a late sweet now and then?" she said. I carried the box onto the train. On the platform, a young couple argued about rent. The man said, "I've paid my share." The words echoed yesterday, but now they drifted past me instead of settling on my shoulders. Back at the apartment, I turned on the warm lamp and poured peppermint tea. I opened the box, cut a slice, and texted Laura a photo. "Makeup bite." She replied with a string of confetti. I opened the blue jacket notebook and wrote, "Honest recognition is light." Then I said no, and work still respects me. The pen moved slowly, surely. Night fell. I scheduled a 7-day mute on family alerts. Not punishment, just keeping my heart from being yanked back. I stacked the printed pages and clipped them neat. Tomorrow, I'd lead meetings, answer clients, trim copy. And each time my hand brushed that clear cover, I'd remember there are two worlds, one where people see me, and one where they see only what I can pay. I stood by the window and watched the yellow cabs drift. I promised myself, whichever world I walk through, I'll choose me first, not out of selfishness, but so I have something left to give. On the dining table, the remaining slice sat quiet. I switched off the lights, drew the curtains, and listened to the city breathe like an unspoken thank you. Saturday morning, I drew the curtains earlier than usual. The street, still glossed with rain, the sky looked like sheet steel. I brewed coffee, opened the Dreams folder, and stared at the Vermont Lake House photo I'd saved on my birthday night. Water like glass, dark wood roof, a wide porch catching the Sunday. Calm spread from my chest to my shoulders. I called the agent, Ruth. The previous owners had moved to Arizona, open to negotiating, and a Sunday showing was possible. I said yes and told Laura I'd be gone half a day. She sent a sun emoji. Go find your light. The mountain road unfurled like a green ribbon. Vermont welcomed me with maple woods and a broad lake. Ruth stood by the wooden gate, a plum-colored scarf around her neck. 3 bedrooms, a loft, A wraparound porch, west-facing glass, she said. I touched the cold brass knob and opened the door. The scent of pine and a hint of cinnamon greeted me. The living room was flooded with light. A glass wall looked out on the lake, where the wind ruffled the water. Sun stripes touched the woven rug on the floor. I walked slowly, letting my palm glide along the window ledge, hearing only the trees whisper and a boat thump softly against a distant dock. The kitchen flowed into the living room gray stone counters, a gleaming stainless steel sink. I pictured a Sunday morning making waffles, Mrs. Parker dropping by, Laura bringing daisies. We'd sit on the porch and watch the water change color. The small bedroom off the kitchen held a slice of blue sky. I saw a reading chair there and an old floor lamp. Upstairs? Ruth said. The wooden stairs creaked. The loft felt like an indoor balcony, pitched wood ceiling, a triangular window catching the afternoon sunday. I stood still and exhaled. The blue jacket notebook would sit on a wooden desk here, so each night I could write one line. Today I showed up for my own life. Ruth handed me a folder. The price was right for my bonus and savings. She talked about the roof, the fireplace, the auxiliary heat, the taxes. I asked what I needed to, took neat notes, then stepped onto the porch. The lake breeze smelled cold and clean. I set my hand on the rail, smooth as a boat's hull. I want to put down a deposit, I said. Ruth smiled. I figured you'd say that. We walked through terms, timelines, inspections. I signed the offer. The pen glided. On the drive back, I called the bank for a proof of funds letter. My credit file was solid, payment history straight as a brick line. My first house in my name, I said. On the other end, they congratulated me and sent next steps. My throat warmed like a sip of ginger tea. That evening, I texted Mrs. Parker. I have news. She replied with a photo of a floral teacup. My doors open. Her apartment smelled of butter and lavender. When I said, Vermont, she nodded. A lake heals aches no doctor prescribes for. You're building a place where your heart can rest. The clock ticked like a needle. I told her about the family dinner, the no dropping like a pebble. She poured more tea. Setting boundaries is redefining home. Home isn't where you're forced to open your wallet. It's where you get your breath back. A week later, the offer was accepted. The inspection found a crack in the back porch and a section of heating pipe to replace. The sellers would fix both before closing. I picked a Friday closing so I could stay the weekend. While I waited, I handled the specifics, moved funds into escrow, got insurance quotes, booked a small move. The night before closing, I lit a candle beside the blue jacket notebook. I wrote, I'm buying a house to live by my own meaning. Then, a home is the quiet answer to silent dinners. The flame trembled like a nod. Closing day, the law office was small, the leather chairs worn. Papers slid across the desk. Each page was a promise. I signed, then received the envelope with the keys. Its weight wasn't metal, it was the feeling that the future smelled of wood. That afternoon, I drove to the lake. Slanting light made the water sparkle. I opened the door. The house breathed a soft welcome, as if it recognized someone new it had known a long time. I set a bunch of yellow mums on the kitchen counter, threw open the glass doors, and let the wind and the lake air rinse the rooms. I hung a little wooden plaque by the door. Birthday sweet, a promise to the child who once waited for a candle. I didn't fuss with decor, white sheets, a nubby throw, a reading chair by the window. I placed the blue jacket notebook on the loft desk, the pen angled like an anchor. Night fell fast. I stepped onto the porch in a sweater and listened to crickets and the soft tick of water under the dock. I called Laura on speaker. Where are you? On my new porch. Is the wind cold? Just enough to wake me up. We were quiet a moment. Congratulations, she said. Name it. I watched the water darken. Harbor a place to pull in and rest. I hung up and leaned against the porch post. I knew tomorrow would bring small chores, change a light bulb, test the auxiliary heat, lay anti-slip mats on the steps. Little things, each saying the same sentence. I'm here, I care for this, I belong. The dawn breeze threaded the pines, carrying the scent of damp leaves. I smiled because at last I'd given myself a place where no one demands my share but me, and my share now has a name, peace. That first night I slept through. I woke to lake sunrise and understood. My birthday gift was freedom. On the first Sunday morning at harbor, I made coffee and slid open the glass doors so lake mist could drift into the kitchen. I snapped a few photos of the porch, a bowl of wild berries, a page of the Blue Jacket notebook beside a pen. I posted them on a private account so friends would know my absence was healthy. I was living for myself. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. Notifications stacked like a column. I opened them and saw the string. Did you hide money to buy the house? Your parents are embarrassed in front of the family. Are you cutting ties with us? Mom called and texted. Why didn't you ask your parents? People are saying you took a loan from the wrong place. I typed, I bought it with legal money, within my means. I'm an adult. Then I flipped the phone face down and sat on the porch to breathe. By noon, Miles texted. You bought a house for show. Need that much attention? I looked at the deep blue lake and answered, I bought it for quiet, not a stage for anyone. He sent a smirking emoji. I put the phone in a drawer and listened to the wooden slide shut, as if reminding me to keep my silence. In the afternoon, a woman from Mom's church messaged, Did you win an inheritance case and get rich? Your mom is really upset. I didn't argue. I wrote my parents an email. Please correct the record. I didn't take shady loans and didn't grab anything from anyone. I used my own bonus and savings. Please respect my boundary. I trimmed the barbs from my words, then hit send. The next day, while I was walking the heating system with a tech, my phone showed a call from the office landline. Reception said, Your father's in the lobby. Says it's urgent. The mirror of the lake outside the porch flashed the fear I knew. He'd use my workplace to say yes for me. I asked them to seat him in a small conference room, then called Laura. If he's there, stand beside me, she said. I'm here. Back in Midtown, the glass hallway reflected him. Dad wore a charcoal suit and a striped tie. He looked around and spoke low. Nice place. Don't embarrass this office. I invited him into the room. Laura pulled out a chair and sat angled like a witness. He began, You're making noise. Neighbors, friends, the parish, they're all talking. Buying a house in. Secret hurt your parents. Stop posting provocations. I sat upright. I posted breakfast and a journal page. No one else is in them. He frowned. But people infer, I said. It's not my fault they choose to believe the worst. He tapped a finger on the table. Fix this. 1. Say you bought the house after consulting your parents. 2. Confirm the $30,000. 3. Send your contacts so Miles can handle things. I met his eyes. I won't do any of those 3. The room seemed to dim a notch. Laura said, Mr. Richards, this is work hours. Please keep this respectful. He gave Laura a thin smile. Family matter, thanks for understanding. Laura stayed calm. Exactly because it's family, respect is even more important. I continued. I'll issue one statement. I use my money for my life. I won't discuss it further. He stared a long moment, then said quietly, You'll be alone. I answered. I'll be by myself when needed. But I won't be lonely. That afternoon at my desk, a new client email waited. We heard about your crisis workshop. Please send an outline. I attached it, and calm settled in. The steadiness stood like a porch post. That night, Mom FaceTimed. The camera showed the familiar ceiling. Her voice shook. You're wearing me out. Everyone keeps asking. Why can't you think of your parents? I stayed silent until she finished. She listed relatives, public opinion, the phrase, unfilial daughter. I was patient. Mom, I already emailed. Please correct the rumors. They're untrue and they hurt me. She burst into tears. You make me ashamed. I swallowed. I wasn't born to be anyone's cover. After the call, I walked the shore. The water was inky. A ribbon of stars stitched the sky. I thought about shame, the hand-me-down blanket people pass around until everyone's cold. I wouldn't take it anymore. I texted Miles one last line. I'm ready to talk. If the goal is respect. If not, I'll be silent. The message sat unread. In the days that followed, the relatives thinned, but didn't fall silent. Sometimes it was a screenshot of an anonymous post, sometimes a news story invented by a distant acquaintance. I learned to answer the same way. I'm fine. I don't discuss private matters. Thank you for checking in. I set filters so only Laura, Mrs. Parker, the office, and the repair folks could ring through. Quiet returned, like a lake that knows how to settle its own waves. On the weekend, I went back to harbor, changed the bulb on the back porch, stuck anti-slip pads on the steps, oiled a squeaky hinge. I found a hairline crack along a stair edge and called a mason. He looked at the lake and said, "Easy to breathe out here." I smiled. It island. That night I wrote in the notebook, "Slander is acid rain. My porch roof is the truth." I closed it and blew out the lamp, knowing another shower might come tomorrow, but the house had learned how to dry. I decided to host a housewarming on a soft, sunny Saturday. All morning, I threw open the glass doors to let the lake wind sweep the rooms, carrying the scent of damp leaves and cool water. On the kitchen table, I set out cheeses, grapes, and crackers. The oven kept a pan of lasagna bubbling. Laura texted she'd come early to help, and Mrs. Parker asked if I needed anything besides a fresh apple pie. I said, "Just bring yourself," and spread a checkered cloth over the porch table. I strung warm white lights along the rail, the bulbs like beads. At the foot of the steps sat a tub of ice and a bottle of champagne. I set up a small kids' table with crayons and paper so they could draw while the adults talked. Laura arrived first, hugging a bunch of sunflowers. She looped through the kitchen for glasses, the artist in her arranging color, yellow blooms by the berries, a sprig of mint in a ceramic vase. "You really did it," she said, eyes sweeping from the wood ceiling to the window ledge. I nodded, tamping my joy down to my breath. "This isn't a getaway," I said. "This is home." Guests trickled in, the creative crew, a project manager, the studio tech with a guitar, the accountant with a sourdough loaf. Everyone thanked me that the drive was easier than they'd thought, and said the lake was so pretty they wanted to kick off their shoes and run to the dock. I set a basket of light blankets in the porch corner for anyone who got chilly. Mrs. Parker arrived last, silver hair pinned up, carrying her pie. She touched my elbow. "Where shall I put it so the whole house smells good?" I pointed to the shelf by the oven, where the warmth would lift the cinnamon. She looked around, her eyes restful as if she'd known the house forever. "You've made a place that invites people to breathe," she said. I swallowed, afraid my voice would break. I raised a glass and invited everyone onto the porch. The sun pulled back from the waterline, leaving a gold road across the waves. I said a few short lines. "Thank you for coming, for seeing me both at work and outside it. This house is a gift I gave myself, and tonight I'm sharing it with the people who make me feel I belong." The chime of glasses spread like small bells. Someone put on music, the studio tech strummed along. Dinner was simple. I cut the lasagna, Laura served salad, coworkers passed the bread basket. Someone asked why I chose Vermont. I talked about still water at dawn, the feel of my hand on the wood rail, and knowing I was in the right place. A colleague said her mother had just retired and wanted a small house by a lake. The talk turned to mosquito tricks and drying herbs. I found myself smiling without effort. Kids spread paper on the floor. One drew a chestnut-brown roof with white smoke curling from the chimney like a storybook. I crouched beside them. "What does the smoke smell like?" The child said. "The apple pie from the lady with silver hair." Laughter. Mrs. Parker pretended to scold. The secret is cold butter and warm hands. At dusk, coworkers asked for photos. I didn't want to show, but I wanted keepsakes. I asked Laura to take a few. Everyone in a half circle on the porch, warm lights on our cheeks, the lake behind us like a breathing mirror. I posted 3 with a caption, "New house, old friends, longer breaths." Compliments trickled in like mist. I replied to a few and put my phone away. I wanted to be fully present, not let a screen wedge itself between the laughter. No one mentioned my family, no one asked about money. They asked if the salad had dill or parsley, when the porch needed a fresh coat, whether I wanted them back in early fall to watch the leaves change. Warm questions. After dessert, the studio tech played an old tune and Mrs. Parker hummed along. I leaned against a porch post, my chest open enough not to brace. Laura stood beside me, her arm brushing mine. "See," she whispered. "This is home." I nodded. Near 9, people gathered plates, everyone wanted to help. I didn't refuse. We washed up in the kitchen, talking about rock salt for winter and storing porch cushions somewhere dry. Ordinary tasks turned into the way we rewove the daily threads I'd been missing. Before leaving, Mrs. Parker handed me a fabric-wrapped bundle tied with twine. "Housewarming gift," she said. I opened it, a quilt pieced from greens, blues, and ash gray. "For the reading chair by the window," she suggested. I pressed my cheek to the cloth and caught the faint scent of Sunday. "Thank you," I said. When the last car left the lane, the porch was quiet again. I gathered stray glasses and clicked the lights off, one strand at a time. The lake had darkened, a few drops of starlight remained. I sat on the step, opened the blue jacket notebook, and wrote, "Tonight I invited the right people." Then, no one demanded my share. Everyone brought theirs. I closed the notebook and leaned against the door. Inside, the new quilt waited on the chair for tomorrow's sunlight. Outside, the damp air cooled the skin on my hands. I knew I'd just finished planting an invisible fence, not to shut people out, but to keep peace in. On Tuesday afternoon, I drove back to the suburban house with 3 photo albums and a folder of expense tables. I texted, 7 o'clock. Keep it short, keep it clear. No one replied, but the door would open. On the way, I stopped at a copy shop to print another set, in case someone said don't remember. Truth needs hard copies. Yes. The stone steps were clean. The bell rang. Mom opened the door. The dining room was ready, vanilla candles, a checkered cloth, straight-lined silverware. Dad sat at the head, chin tipped up. Miles poured wine. Jessica stared at her plate. I took off my coat, set my bag by the chair, and sat up straight. "Let's get to it," I said. I set the first album in front of Miles. Birthdays. Page 1. A little boy in a paper hat, a multi-tiered cake, balloons brushing the ceiling. I flipped fast. Karaoke at 12. Car keys to a sedan at 16. A rooftop party at 21. Each year had dates, locations, copies of receipts. I slid the album toward my parents. "This one is mine." I opened the second album. Many blank pages, just a few photos. Me blowing out a candle with Grandma, me eating a cupcake at the sink, me hugging a carrot cake in a paper bag. I didn't say much. Silence was enough background for the contrast. Mom laced her fingers. "I remember we did one at Red Lobster?" I flipped to a yellow sticky note, pulled a handwritten slip. "Sorry, sweetie. Miles has a competition this week." I slid it to her. At last, the napkin touched her eyes. The third album, Trips. Disneyland, the Grand Canyon, Europe. "Where am I?" I asked. Dad frowned. "You were with Grandma. Back then, circumstances." I nodded. "I understand circumstances. I just want the adults to call what happened by its right name." I set down a Christmas photo from 3 years ago. An empty chair with a place card bearing my name and a text saying, "We missed you." I pointed to the table's corner. That's the guest seat. I opened the expense table. Left column Miles, right column Angela. Line items: tuition, birthday gifts, travel, car, emergency support. The numbers poured down like a waterfall. The gap was plain. I handed over the notes page, email sources, statements, invoices, texts. Dad turned the pages slowly, his face darkening. "Why say this now?" Dad asked. I answered, "I used to hope if I gave more, I'd be seen." On my last birthday, I realized that hope had blinded me. I pulled out an old scrap in a child's handwriting. "I wish next year, Mom and Dad remember my birthday." I read it evenly. Miles leaned back and sighed. "What do you keep all this for? What good is digging up the past?" I looked at him. Not to humiliate anyone. To stop the cycle. Jessica lifted her face, clearly uncomfortable. Dad stood, the chair scraping the floor. "Enough. Every family has imbalances. You have a career, what more do you want?" I kept it tight, to be treated fairly. For daughter to mean a person, not just a wallet. My voice stayed even. Mom touched the photo of me at 6 with a cupcake. I'm sorry for the times we forgot. "But your father had to plan your brother's future," I answered. "My brother's future shouldn't be paid for with my childhood." I stopped there. I laid the albums in a row like exhibits. Part 1, Memories. Part 2, The Money Flow. Part 3, Recent Behavior. I pulled the printed group chat stack. Angela got a bonus. Her part needs to be clear, don't be direct. Angela is sensitive. Dad tried to yank it away. I held firm. Everyone keeps a copy. I handed one to Jessica too. No. One spoke. The clock measured our breathing. I said, "I'll attend the wedding as a guest. I'm not giving $30,000, I'm not handling PR, and I'm not handing over my contacts. I recommend hiring a wedding planner." "I won't revisit these points," Miles asked quietly. "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "I'm learning not to hate so I can live lighter. I'm just done paying for what I didn't buy." He stared at the table's edge. Jessica squeezed his hand. "Let's listen." Dad walked to the window, back to the garden. "I admit we favored him, but this family has to stand tall in front of others. You exposing us like this," I cut in. "I'm not exposing. I'm labeling. Labeling the truth." I slid the envelope with the expense copies toward him. "If you want a different label, change the numbers." Mom dabbed her eyes and asked, "If I truly apologize, will you stay for dinner?" I looked at the sky gone dark, the porch light glowing gold. I shook my head. "Not tonight. I need to keep my decision intact." I stood and put the albums into my bag. Then I paused. I left 2 behind. Miles and trips. "Keep these here," I said. "Every home should have a mirror." I took Angela's birthdays, still heavy with blank pages. "I'll fill the rest myself." At the door, Dad called, "You'll find yourself lonely turning your back." I answered, "I'm turning toward myself. Anyone who wants to come along can walk slowly, and with respect." I opened the door. Night air slipped in. On the porch, I heard Mom sniffling, Jessica whispering, Miles exhaling. I didn't look back. I stepped down, the stone cold through my soles. My fingers tightened on the bag handle, and I felt a different weight take root, a person no longer defined by others. In the car, I set the remaining copies on the passenger seat. I buckled up and started the engine. In the rear view, the door swung toward closed. I rested my hand on the stack as if on a spine. The road to the city unspooled straight, with few lights, just enough to know I wasn't fleeing, I was driving home. I drove through the night, the road a dark ribbon, tree shadows roofing the sky. On the passenger seat, the papers and the last album bounced lightly over potholes, like a heart no longer racing. I didn't turn on music, the engine made room for the sound of my breath. From the moment I put Angela's birthdays in my bag, I gave myself a new job, fill the blank pages, not to prove anything, but to be present. Back in Manhattan, I cut the engine and carried the papers upstairs. The apartment glowed low and warm old sofa, a fern by the window, everything waiting in place. I set the album on the table, made peppermint tea, opened my laptop, 4 emails. Mom, Dad, Miles, Jessica. I didn't open them. First I wrote. Subject. Boundary statement, Angela. A short preface. I honor the truth that's been named. From today, I'll act by the principles below. I numbered them like an emergency exit card. 1. I'll attend the wedding as a guest and pay my own way. 2. I won't contribute $30,000, won't handle PR, hotels, flowers, or any planning items. 3. I won't share personal contacts or partner information outside proper channels. 4. I decline any discussions aimed at revising the above. Then I open the emails. Mom wrote long, broken lines, a mix of apology and blame. I read lightly, catching on nothing. Dad wrote one sentence, "You've made your choice." I replied, "Yes, and I accept responsibility." Miles asked, "Why leave the albums?" I said, "So the family can look." Jessica thanked me for the materials and said she'd find a planner herself. I leaned on the window ledge and watched the city breathe through its squares of light. The boundary statement was a contract with myself. There were things I used to let others decide. Now, each item was a switch flipped back to me. The next morning, I took a personal day and drove to Harbor. Dew on the porch, a strand of warm lights kissing the roofline. I spread Mrs. Parker's quilt over the reading chair, set the blue jacket notebook on the side table, poured coffee. I wrote, Day 1 after speaking clearly. I am calm. At 9 a.m. Mom texted, I'm sorry for the times I forgot. Your father is struggling. Give me time. I sent a thumbs up and, take care of yourself, I'm okay. Dad was silent. Miles sent a photo, him reading the expense table. Under it, just okay. I didn't reply. One word was enough to say, a door had cracked open. At noon, the conveyance attorney said the paperwork was complete, the insurance active, I could file for the homestead tax reduction. I noted it and hung up. I walked the house, sunk a proud nail at the porch step, changed the flickering porch light. Each small task felt like a brick in a new wall, steady, without being rigid. In the afternoon, Laura drove up with a basket of oranges. She set it on the table and studied me. You're different. I smiled. Different as in lighter. We walked the dock. The water knocked the posts like a two-knock and done. Laura said, a declaration is one thing, living by it is another. I nodded. I'll repeat it daily, like brushing my teeth. After she left, I sat on the porch and opened my work email. The CEO sent a thank you note for the training I designed. A new client accepted a date. I replied brief and set a team meeting for Monday. Work flowed back into its banks. I understood that saying no at home didn't break my yes where I belong. That evening, an unknown number called. Aunt Carol's voice. She circled around, then said, Don't push your father. Our family's good name. I answered. I've been clear, I don't need advice. She reached for old stories. I cut in. I'm not discussing this tonight. Sleep well, Aunt. Polite, final. In the kitchen, I opened my own album. The blank pages looked back. I took a pen and titled, 34th Birthday, Lake House. I wrote a few lines about the gold lights, a glass of wine, the breeze on my neck. I pressed in a dried maple leaf Laura had picked that afternoon. Late at night, my phone lit. A text from Dad. We'll hire a planner, attend as a guest. I looked at the screen a beat longer than needed. Then typed, thank you. It felt like laying the last foundation stone. I turned off the big light and left the loft lamp pouring honey down the stairs. I ran my hand along the rail and felt the grain. Tomorrow I'd buy a wind chime and hang it on the west corner to let the air speak for me when I want to be quiet. I climbed to the loft, slid under the nubby throw, and heard my heart knock steady, like a paddle tapping water. Before sleep, I whispered, I don't need to win. I need to be true. The sentence lay down beside me like a warm stone. Outside, the lake pulled the sky close, and in the house's wooden warmth, I knew a chapter had closed. Not slammed, just shut flush. The rest, the quiet days, the small tasks, the just right visits would fill in the pages. I'd signed the statement and was living it, and from now on, each morning when my feet touch the floor, I'll tell myself, my name is Angela, and my boundary is my home. I smiled in the dark, listening to the lake murmur, knowing I'd chosen the right road for the year ahead. A year is long enough for me to recognize the new folds of my life. Spring came to Vermont with the smell of sap and the sound of ice breaking under the dock. I rose early, made coffee in the wood kitchen, set my hand on the rail as if greeting the day. Boundaries are home, I reminded myself, then swept wet leaves off a step corner and listened to the west-hung chime ring one round note. In New York, work found a new rhythm. I finished 2 crisis trainings, led a series of digital health campaigns, and by summer, got the senior director promotion. The announcement was simple, a company-wide email and a new name pin. I thanked the team and my own persistence. On free weekends, I went back to harbor. I planted lavender along the path, added a few solar lights that turned into dots after dark. The loft desk collected new books, novels, and a few on family systems therapy. I met my therapist regularly, learning to name feelings instead of judging them. Some sessions I just watched the lake change color and said, I'm okay today. Some I choked up but felt safe, like being in a boat with a life vest. Laura became a regular. She brought watercolors to paint the lake, then abandoned her brush, halfway to sing along with the radio. We joked that harbor was a lab for calm, where every experiment proved the same result, a heart beating just enough. Mrs. Parker coached me, bring in the mats before hail, tell the difference between squirrel sounds and mink, then rewarded me with apple pie. I drove her to the farmer's market, brought home dark strawberries. My family, after that confrontation, stepped back a circle. For months, Mom texted briefly, have you eaten? I planted more roses. I answered politely, keeping a measured pace. Dad said, little, but in summer he sent one line, the planner is doing fine. I replied, glad to hear it. We didn't revisit the past. The boundary kept our words free of accusation. I grew quietly like a branch finding its own Sunday. Miles changed slowly but clearly. In August, he wrote, got a place to digitize old photos? I want to scan the albums. I sent him my studio. A few weeks later, he sent a restored picture, me at 7 on a tire swing, hair messy, smile tilted. Underneath he wrote, I'm sorry I didn't see you. I looked for a long time without crying. I printed it and set it on the desk like a little lamp. I also changed my holiday habits. 4. Thanksgiving. I didn't fly to Chicago. I rented a wood cabin near the mountains, ate roast chicken with a few new friends, then called Mom with good wishes. She said, I tried a pumpkin pie. First attempt was uneven, I said. First attempts usually are, and we both laughed. After, I set down the phone and realized that being cared about without being crowded was a luxury I'd bought with the word no. By year's end, snow lay thick on the roof. I stuck reflective tape on the steps and added a strip for traction. On windy nights, the chimes sang, peace. I learned a little digital piano, 15 minutes each evening. My fingers were clumsy, but the notes were steady, like the footsteps of someone who'd stopped running. For my 34th birthday, Laura brought a few close colleagues up. Everyone laughed. I stood on the porch with a glass of wine and watched the gold road across the lake, like a letter rewritten. Right then, a BMW turned onto the lane. Miles stepped out with a wrapped package. He paused at the porch edge, uncertain. I held out a hand. Come in. He nodded to everyone and sat in the chair beside me. The chatter drifted into background. He opened the package, A simple wood frame with a larger restored print of the tire swing smile. He said softly. I started therapy. I'm beginning to understand some things. I'm not asking you to forget just to know I'm changing. I set the frame on the table and let the ribbon flick in the breeze. Thank you for coming, I said. He looked at the lake. I get why you chose this place. At the end, everyone cleaned up. Miles helped me stack glasses, quietly offering a tryout at being siblings. Before he left, he stood on the porch. I'll talk to Mom and Dad about therapy. Dad's tough, but I'll try. I nodded. Go slow. He smiled, tired. Slow and steady. Late that night, the house settled. I placed the frame on the shelf beside the nearly full blue jacket notebook. On the year's last page I wrote, I didn't wait for recognition to choose myself, and recognition arrived like a polite guest, knocking and waiting for my yes. I blew out the candle and stood a while in the soft dark. The lake reflected a sky thin as silk. I understood that a year of change isn't loud. It's a string of small, right, patient movements that carried me from worn out to a harbor I named myself. The next morning, I woke early, boiled water, and opened the door to let in the cold air. I looked at the framed photo, smiling at the little girl on the swing. We're okay, I whispered. The wind chime rang as if in agreement. In the corner of the table, Miles's wedding invitation sat there, a request without obligations. I marked the date, planning to buy a small gift, within my means, from the heart. The road ahead still curved, but I had learned to read my own signs. If my heart felt crowded, stop. If my breath grew longer, keep going. The following spring, I returned to harbor after a long work trip. The road around the lake opened into fresh patches of green, tender grass sprouting through layers of fallen leaves. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard the wind chime ring softly, like an old friend's greeting. On the wooden table, the frame Miles had given me still stood, beside the blue jacket notebook now filled with words. I placed a new one there, reserved for the unwritten journey. That afternoon, Mom called. Her voice was softer. Your father and I want to come up to Vermont. Not to discuss anything, just to visit you. I stayed silent for a few seconds, then agreed. When they arrived, I didn't set out a feast. I only brewed tea and sliced apple pie. Dad stood on the porch, staring at the lake longer than I expected. Mom touched the railing. It's beautiful, you've kept it well. I didn't answer, just smiled and set down the tray. No more requests, no more demands, just silence, and a door, slightly ajar. That night, after they left, I sat on the steps. The sky stretched like silk, the moon casting light across the water. I knew the past couldn't be erased, but the present could soften. My relationship with my family wasn't whole, but it had changed. Fewer burdens, more pauses. And in those pauses, I found relief. A year earlier, I had walked out of the old house carrying a stack of albums as evidence. Now, I sat in a home of my own choosing, knowing my worth wasn't measured in contributions or in other people's approval. It rested in my ability to stand tall, to choose for myself, and still leave a crack open for hope, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. I closed the notebook and lifted my eyes to the lake. Life would continue to test me, but I had learned to answer with clarity. And sometimes, the answer was nothing more than a full smile, a warm cup of tea, a door left not quite shut. My story closes here, but new pages are waiting. If anyone has ever seen themselves in blank pages, please believe you can fill them with your own words. Thank you for walking with me through this journey. If my story touched your heart, please leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe to follow more journeys ahead. Your support is a precious gift that allows me to tell more stories. I am truly grateful to have you sitting here with me on this porch, listening and sharing.